Going to transition now into the deep green segment of our program today. And it's a fitting transition because we've been learning about the intelligence of the plant world and the beautiful technology. And this next hour and a half, we're going to be looking at cannabis and its different dimensions. And we're also going to conclude at the end of this segment with an exploration of the psychedelic nature as well. And so Deep Green was actually began with an event that we produced in San Francisco back in 2011 and 12 on Earth Day, and we were celebrating cannabis as an emissary of nature. And as we all have seen, cannabis is uniquely attuned to the human being. The plant offers us countless benefits. We're just finally, as we come out of this dark age of prohibition, the prohibition of an herb, we are learning so much more about it with our modern science and just the practical application of cannabis in so many ways. So we'll be exploring that during this panel or series of panels. We're going to start off with a celebration of the spirit of cannabis. And we're going to be joined right now by Chris Conrad, who's been for many years a major activist and remains to this day an activist on the cutting edge of cannabis culture. He'll be sharing with us. We also are joined by Swami Chaitanya, who is a well-known figure internationally in the world of cannabis, both as a master grower, but also as essentially a philosopher. And finally, Mountain Girl will be joining us, Carolyn Garcia, who's been part of the cultural renaissance that began back in the 60s. And we will follow this celebration of the spirit of cannabis, which will go until the bottom of the hour. And we're going to have an amazing panel there, which is something that's very, very significant, and that is the transition away from the drug war and paying attention to the prisoners of the drug war who are still in prison. So we'll be going into that after this section. Yes, Kitty.
You guys, I just want to say we're drinking from a fire hose of wisdom here. And I really encourage you, if you have not done so yet, to please join the community at Earthdance.tv. And because you'll have replays of all this. I know I want to go back and see that sound healing workshop again. I want to hear those panels again. And these upcoming panels are going to be so extraordinary. So just to encourage you, be sure to join the community at earthdance.tv. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jenny Dragonfly, for joining us here today. We're going to continue. Nikki Listretto is going to be helping with the hosting of the next few sessions. And Nikki, I'll let you introduce our group here on the call.
Okay, well, hello guys, nice to see you and everybody else. It's so happy to be part of the Earthdance family. It's in my genes at this point. I love these people. And I know they're bringing you lots of good vibes today. So we're going on to our first meeting, our first talk today about celebrating the spirit of cannabis. And this is something that's very near and dear to our hearts because we all know cannabis is a lot more than just getting high. It's about really the spirit that it creates and that it shares with us. So our speakers today for this group, we have Swami Chaitanya, who I know very well because he's my husband and best friend, and we've been on this path for lifetimes. So Swami's up here at our ranch. He's one of the co-founders of Swami Select Cannabis, and we grow some beautiful craft cannabis flowers. And plus he is an actual Swami and from America, but was Dean, what's the word, Swami? He was made a Swami in about 1998. Also on this one, we have Mountain Girl. Is Mountain Girl here yet?
No, she hasn't tuned in yet.
Okay. Well, I can certainly give the, and Michael, you might help me out here a little bit. I just know Mountain Girl lives up in Oregon and has, she was the writer of the first definitive book about growing that all the hippies read back in the very early days. It was just sort of a mimeograph pamphlet or something. So Mountain Girl goes way back, and she has lots of other connections. She is Jerry Garcia's wife, and she obviously comes from a strong background of knowing very good spirit in cannabis. And the third speaker today is Chris Conrad. And Chris, oh, there's Chris is here, wonderful. And Chris is a dear friend, and Chris has been an activist in the cannabis world for decades now, representing people in court and just really understanding what this plant means on so many levels. And he's also a Cannamaste. He's the founder of Cannamaste, which he will describe to you a little bit later in detail, which is a wonderful church about cannabis that using cannabis as the ritual substance to really honor spirit. So I think we have three very appropriate speakers here, Ghazni. Thank you so much for everyone for getting this together at Earthdance, and let's see what they have to say, I guess. Mountain Girl should be here any minute.
All right, well, let's go ahead. Swami, we'll let you open our Spirit of Cannabis session here.
Okay. Well, often people just ask me questions, so here I'm going to just freewheel it, because we're a worldwide consciousness that we're building here with Earthdance, and we're just building on what many, many people have built together over many, many centuries as a world awareness. And cannabis has always been very much part of that. Most research indicates that cannabis originated way back, thousands and thousands of years ago, maybe about in the backside of where the Soviet Union used to meet up with China, now Kazakhstan and so on. And that's the cradle of a lot of civilization. And it was always used as a spiritual, what should we say, elevator for the people of the tribal groups that were mostly herder groups that were all across the Siberian steppes. But they've always used it for sacramental purpose. And they found 5,000 years ago in caves, they find these pouches with cannabis and various ritual elements that people used for getting to close to the spirit of this element. So I think what we always want to remember now is that in spite of being prohibited and denigrated and called, you know, a nasty drug and the devil's weed, cannabis has a long, long history, tens of thousands of years of human use. And we use that now as a background for us to grow more and more aware of what is the magic about this plant. So the magic is, if you imagine an ancient person somewhere on the other side of the world, and you find this beautiful plant growing there and it smells delicious, and all of a sudden you actually, maybe you throw it on the fire to get the incense, and all of a sudden you have a consciousness raising experience just by accident. And so there are many, many instances where religious ceremonies have used incense. And let's speculate that quite likely they would have thrown a little cannabis in there as well. And then everybody in the whole room gets really high. I mean, you've got your frankincense, you've got your myrrh and so on, but hey, let's throw a little more extra of that cannabis in there. And everybody then gets a common experience of raising and so on. And I think one of the key things that cannabis does is it raises your consciousness almost immediately to your third eye awareness. Now, we know that there's still a little more to go beyond that. But when you get to third eye awareness, you're getting to a place where the heart and the reason are coming together. And so you understand rationally with compassion. And that's one of the ways that cannabis will take down your prejudices and your blinders. And this will then open you up to experience with other people. So we've always used it in the hippie community and so on. In the modern community, we've used it always as an awakener, as an inspiring herb to help creativity with music, with all kind of artistic things, writing and so on. So that to me is kind of how we use it today as an inspiration. And along the way, of course, we discovered the medical use. But the medical use is as old as any other use. It probably was the first medicine. So cannabis to me has always been one of the teachers of humanity. When they first developed horse riding and they put a bit in a horse, that was hemp rope that they used to tame the horse and make it for riding. A whole change in civilization. When they first invented pottery, they find pottery with twine around it for decoration. That was hemp twine. They find other pottery with hemp seeds embedded in it. And so that's along with the development of pottery. So cannabis, they're sitting around smoking. What are we going to do? And they make pottery and they decorate it with cannabis. So worldwide, cannabis has always been involved in people's realization of one another and how they're connected. So maybe I should let Chris take over for a minute. And a mountain girl I see is ready to be here. Hi, mountain girl.
I have trouble with all those numbers, you know.
Got Carolyn in the house. All right.
Hi.
Thank you, Swami. Chris, you want to pick it up there a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. As Nikki was mentioning, I'm going to be talking about Cantheism and the Cannamaste circle in a little bit. But just to give you a little bit of a sense of myself, I've always been a deeply spiritual and religious person. I was raised in a Catholic household. I was convinced I was going to become a Catholic priest. In fact, my pursuit of this connection to the spiritual godliness of the universe led me actually to go to seminary for 2 years. And after 2 years of studying the history of the Catholic Church, including the Inquisition, I felt I could no longer try to convert people to that religion because it had such a terrible record of hypocrisy between what the teachings of Jesus were and what the church was. So then I left it and maintained some spirituality. But not too long after I left the seminary, I smoked cannabis for the first time. And I felt that it opened the world up to me on another dimension that was far beyond anything I had gone through with all the church experiences I'd had up to that point. And so this kind of then led me to consume cannabis on a spiritual as well as a pleasure, as well as, I wasn't really thinking medical because I was pretty young at the time, a basis for many years. And during the 1990s, because I was working on trying to legalize cannabis and industrial hemp and medical marijuana and also fight off the drug war, I thought that the religious use argument was one of our strongest ones. The First Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, state laws, all had protections for religious consumption, or religious activity, I should say. And so I pursued into that, and I started looking at it and what it took to make a religion. And I found out that basically most of the things we needed were already in place. We already had a long history of use. Many religions were already using cannabis as part of their spiritual events and so forth. The Coptics, the Rastafarians, the Sadhu. Of course, we read about it in the writings of Herodotus about the Thracians and the Scythians, and then all these tombs that are being found. So we've known it's been for quite a long time. And also I felt that people who use cannabis tend to do these ritualistic things like gather in a circle and the way they shared the joints and respect for one another. And so I pulled it into this, but because I was working as an expert witness in the courts, I didn't pursue it because they were afraid it would make me look a little bit, well, the prosecutors would use it to, I should say, try to make me look kind of wacky. And so it wasn't until after we actually legalized cannabis that we started doing these circles. And it's been pretty profound finding out how many people are interested in doing this and how many people have this connection and how much continuity there is between us and the people of the past. And I believe this is our gate to the future, the people of posterity from here, and that in addition to saving the environment through industrial hemp, we also need to save the spirit with cannabis. And I guess I'll turn it over to whoever's next, Nikki. Cannamaste, everyone.
Well, maybe Carolyn, since you've joined us, if you'd like to just share with us your experience with cannabis and the culture that it helped inspire.
Interestingly enough, I first tried cannabis when I was about 17 in Palo Alto, emancipated teen that I was. And the first thing I noticed was that the cannabis users were all living far distant from each other, and you'd have to travel and go to someone's house and meet people who shared this particular herb, and that it was this incredibly sort of diluted friendship network of people who were cannabis users and growers and sellers. And after a while, we all knew each other, all at a considerable distance. It took quite a bit of travel, but it was a friendship network. So it was this sort of very powerful underground. This is 1964. So, it was tremendously illegal at that time. So it created a network and a bond between people. Just the herb itself was so attractive that you would drive 20 or 30 miles to have a toke with some friends. And it's an amazing bonding agent for groups of people. And I think this is still going on everywhere we can see into the world of cannabis today. It's created tremendous friendships, families, bonds, and the spiritual aspect of those subtle changes in the brain. Those soft, subtle thoughts that started to creep in and just change the way you think about things. And then the complexity that it brought also into the thought process. This was something that I think that those very early days we shared. And it was important.
And it's interesting how today we're understanding the effect of the cannabinoids on the human system and how we're all totally attuned to the cannabis plant's offerings.
Yeah.
And I know, Swami, you've got some good insights into that consciousness expanding effect of cannabis.
Michael, when you mentioned that, Mountain Girl, that I was just thinking about the 420 celebrations we've had in Golden Gate Park in the last couple of years. And they're like 20,000 people instead of like 5 or 6 or 10 you're talking about. But people still drove for miles and miles and miles to come together to be at the Golden Gate Park at Hippie Hill and 420 to share this experience with everybody. And as you look out at the crowd, you would see all different races, colors, creeds, persuasions, anything, all of the entire California spectrum of population was all there. And everybody had their little group together, but then the groups of groups and the groups of groups of groups. This was an amazing consciousness expanding thing. And so to me, cannabis is the everyday psychedelic. It just alters your perspective on things. It takes away a lot of your filters that prevent you from hearing well or seeing well or even understanding with compassion. And so it's that way in which cannabis has been teaching us from thousands of years ago. And it taught me how to grow food. It taught so many people how to do those things. And it's really important, that ritual of sharing. And that's part of a group consciousness that cannabis is so easy about creating. And that is the spiritual part. But there's a molecular thing in the plant. There's like a spirit within the plant itself, the actual plant. And most of the people up here growing up in the mountains have kind of imbibed that spirit. And we have kind of a messianic purpose to bring people to this plant and be able to use it and share it. But it's, I don't know. Sorry.
Well, we're coming up on 420, and it's kind of interesting that this has become symbolic worldwide for cannabis. The 420 time, the 420 date, and the mythos behind that was the kids in San Rafael that used to have 420 as the code word to go sneak away and get high.
That's amazing.
So for those who might want to share in that ritual, here we are almost at 420.
Ooh.
And we got some slides that Swami supplied. We'll run a little bit, but
Michael, I wanted to say that listening to all this talk is really reminds me again how much of a tribe we are. And as a tribe, we have our rituals and we do those together. It really is a tribe that finds itself from all across the entire planet. And, whether we're in Amsterdam or Goa or South Africa or Israel, just think about it. It's so spread out, which Earthdance exemplifies. And it's a tribe. We're a wonderful big tribe. So I really want to thank you all for reminding me of that.
It's the human tribe.
And if I may throw in something as well, there's the whole fact of like what Mountain Girl was saying about people trying to find each other. I think that's really the power of 420, is that people want somebody to smoke with. And then at 420, you know there are other people smoking. So it creates this automatic community. Anytime you light up at 420, you know you're lighting up with your friends and people you've never even met. And so I think that connection, which I see as a sacramental relationship, is implicit in the very spontaneous arrival of 420 as a time when people smoke.
I agree. I think it's a ritual. It's a ritual that we share. And if you can remember what time it is, you can have it with other people. But you know, it's just that thing that it seeps into your brain and makes these subtle alterations. And I think it reduces your fear of otherness. You know, you become more interested in otherness rather than being afraid of it.
Yeah.
And that's magic.
Yep.
Everywhere you go, you can find people who will share a joint with you. You just have to pull it out.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So right now, you know, how many people are participating in this ritual sacrament at this time. And it is
Michael, I want to say, I want to bring up some things that don't get as much mention and publicity as possible. And one is that you know, the Muslim world, the Arabic world also has cannabis, and particularly the Sufi parts of the Muslim world are very much, certain sects of those are very much into cannabis and use it for their ecstatic dancing. So the Arabic world and the Muslim world has been very important about taking cannabis all over the world. And it's quite likely that Arabic traders took it all the way down into Africa, which is quite next door, right? And so then we have to understand that the African people likewise developed their own culture of cannabis in their tribes, and a lot of people, they still call it daga. And then, of course, as the slave trade came over, the African peoples brought cannabis with them. And so it's through that they came into the jazz world. And then we also have to remember that all of the Mexican weed that was coming up from Central America, and that we owe that all of our Latino brothers and sisters, that connection also coming into California, and the Mexican weed and so on. And then the Jamaicans and the Thais and all of a sudden the Moroccans. I mean, it's just worldwide. And we have that consciousness, and that's what we celebrate on Earthdance. And this plant is a celebration of the earth. And so now we have a little celebration. Now there's so many ways to consume cannabis, but one of my favorites, of course, is the joint. And the joint is one of the things that gives you all of the terpenes and cannabinoids that are in the cannabis as you smoke it, and it goes from room temperature up to combustion, right? And so it's the way to fully get everything in the cannabis that's, you know, less than 420 degrees or something combustion. But you see, there's another connection which Nikki actually just reminded me of, and that is when you're smoking, it's also prana as a yogic exercise, right? The prana now, the prana is the vital energy that's in the breath of the air, and you bring it in with the cannabis mixed together. And so you're vitalizing your internal consciousness with the prana of the energy of the air with the cannabis, right? So then it works throughout your cannabinoid system, your endocannabinoid system, as Chris always likes to talk about, is the meditation of the cannabinoids working through your body and connecting to all the different parts of the body, almost like the Vipassana meditation, right? And right, Nikki's saying, time, light that silly joint, Swami.
Light that joint, Swami. Shut up, you know, give some prana.
No, wait a second. You said I had 5 minutes to do this. Huff, puff, puff. So here we go.
And I've got to wonder how the old ancient Israelites used cannabis besides putting it on their altars. What was their method of ingestion? Can we guess?
Well,
actually, they kind of know.
The method is probably drinking, and also with the holy anointing oil. There's some evidence, there's considerable evidence the holy anointing oil in the Bible had cannabis as its fragrant reed, as Chris talks about, the sweet smelling fragrant reed, right? That's the true hemp. And that's the one that then they put in the holy anointing oil. So if you imagine with holy anointing oil, it's got frankincense and myrrh and various oils, and then the cannabis oil infused with THC. So now you get it dripped over your head. So you know how cannabis oil goes through the skin. You get really stoned if you trim without gloves, right?
Yes.
So this person who's getting anointed with this holy anointing oil is actually maybe very well having an out-of-body experience because they just got drenched with THC cannabis oil. But anyway, a couple dabs will still do you, right? So I think a lot of it was in drinks and shared baked goods like we have, you know, brownies, you know, were there Israeli brownies that were loaded?
Right.
And it's also in tinctures. There's a lot of evidence that early alchemists made tinctures with cannabis, right? You know, early on in 1400. People have been known about this for a long time, but it's been persecuted and then celebrated and persecuted and celebrated and back and forth. And then the religious and the power groups, they don't want people to experience God directly. And cannabis really helps you. I'm going to say it. Cannabis helps you experience God and the divinity and the feminine divinity as well directly in your life. Authorities don't often like that. So smoke up, everybody, and meet the divine.
Well, and that's a good segue to let Chris, for the remaining time, we've got about 5 minutes before our Righting the Wrongs of the Drug War panel, a fitting next step after this celebration. But Chris Conrad, as someone who has worked, you were intimately involved in Jack Herrera's book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, which has recently been republished. And all of these years since, you've been a leading activist, helping change the laws. And I know that you and your wife, Mickey Norris, who's going to join us to MC this next panel, were very involved in Prop 64 in California. But I know, you know, that all of this legalization is still not really getting to the fundamental reality of what cannabis is and our relationship to it. And fittingly, the celebration in a serious way of the spiritual sacramental nature of cannabis is what you've been working on over the past couple of years. So please share with us your work with Cannamaste and Cantheism.
Well, thanks, Michael. And I have some slides here. I don't know if we're going to be able to work them through or not, but if they are up at some point, I want to just bring up the fact that we've entered into this whole thing. My concept of it, again, was a legal argument, but that connected with the tradition of cannabis use over history. And so one of the things I wanted to do was to meet the various standards that were required to be a religion. And one of the things is we needed a symbol. And I don't know if there's going to show up at some point or if I just describe it.
Yeah, we're.
Okay, great. Well, the first one is just, that's our symbol for Cantheism. And then let's go straight to the second slide, because basically the second slide, it shows you where this derives from. The idea of the emblem for religion is it should be easy to mark this, easy to make. And so I thought this particular line is the oldest representation of cannabis that I could find. It's an Egyptian hieroglyph. And if you see in the middle upper top, you see the glyph from a stela on the right, and on the left, you see a twist of hemp, which is what this is based on. We see the goddess here, Sheshat, who is using this hook that we use to pull the hemp out of the water, but over her head, there's a star, which is also a cannabis leaves and so forth. And also we have another Egyptian god here, Ta, who's breathing immortal wisdom into one of the pharaohs. And above him, we see again the symbol. On the bottom, you'll see there's a little alphabetic line, because that symbol went into the Semitic languages. And I just want to point out, since Mountain Girl asked about using hemp, if you see that it became, for Egypt, it was the hemp fiber. For the Semitic languages, it was a tent. And of course, tents are made out of canvas. And then, of course, then we get to the Romans, and they switched that from the Greek to the Greek model, which is cannabis with a K, and then change it to a C, and which is the form that we use now. But then we get the word canvas from cannabis, which is also, so it's kind of backwards. From the symbol, we got hemp, meaning the tents, and then from changing the language, it comes back to being the same fabric. But in any case, so this has a very long history. Let's jump straight to this next thing. Ever since the Neolithic era, there have been people using cannabis, usually burning it and stuff like that. The oils are quite as common as well. And so what I did was I looked at what we had, just a few of these are listed here: Shiva and the Sadhu using bhang, the Scythians having their smoking huts, the Babylonian tree of life, which I point it's not the tree of good and knowledge that you talk about in the Bible in Eden. This is the tree of life. And then the Rastafarians today. And so I looked at what was already going on. I didn't want to start a new religion by making anything up. So what I did is I distilled it into this ritual ceremonial practice, which we have now called Cannamaste, which is a reference back to the Hindu word, namaste. And then, so sometimes we call it ganja. We also use the word splee for honoring. So a lot of the things that we do are related to the other religions. But what we do mainly is we get together into a circle, we recite the creed, we share the herb by circulating a joint. People go into an internal voyage where they have a mystical connection. And then after that, they can say anything that is spontaneously occurs to them that they need to say before they forget. But basically, the next thing we go is to a more profound discussion of what people are doing. You set your intentions at the beginning, of course. And then after this more intense conversation about what your relationship is, then we can do some movement or exercise. And then we close with another circle and a resonant sound. Sometimes it's Om, but we're not dogmatic. So it could be Ma, it could be Ho, it could be any kind of resonant sound. And then the next thing I want to jump to is with some scenes of people in the ceremonies. You might recognize Swami's shirt there in the upper right on the lower side where we share and connect. But basically, we pass the joint off to the right and hold it in the right hand. And I think I'm mirroring my thing, so it may not look like you, but that is, again, a reference back to the Hindu because of their having the right hand as being more sacred and the left more profane. And we roll joints together. This is a major part of it. The 420, just because it's part of our culture, we like to use that. And I know I'm out of time, so I'm just going to pop straight to the next slide. And the pass, and then the joint, obviously. And we look into each other's eyes as you pass the joint, because now you're connecting. You've come up from yourself. Now you're connecting with the person with you in a bigger group. And then we do the Cantheist Creed. I don't have time to read through it, but people can come back and freeze this frame, I would imagine, if they want to take a look at it.
Yeah.
The basic thing, though, is that the creed has legal importance that we have a creed, but also the first 3 points of the creed are basically facts, statement of facts. Just, you don't have to have a mystical or any dogmatic belief. It's just fact. And the last 3 are some values. And the last one being to inhale and pass it on, because we want to share this, but without being obnoxious about it, and things like that. And then there are some basics that we do in the circle, which is the left hand on the heart. You hold the spleef in the right hand. You pass to the right. You look into the eyes of the person that you're saying Cannamaste, you say to each other, and then you pass it on, continuing to the right. And so the idea is that what we want to do is to get people to understand these 2 practices of passing and saying Cannamaste when you pass the joint, and then to think about what these points are in this creed that unites us. And that way it gives people not only the connection to the community and a way of going past all the commercialism today, but it also gives you legal defense in court under various laws that I obviously don't have time to explain right now.
All right, beautiful. Chris, thank you so much. Cantheism, the website for that is cantheism.org.
Yes, or cannamaste.org. And we also have Cantheism because, as was pointed out by Michael at one of our first events, people are atheists and they still use cannabis as a sacrament. So we don't want to exclude them. So we alternate the spellings.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for this beautiful exchange here.